OK， 欢迎大家今天晚上周三来参加我们的一个重磅的分享。首先让我花点时间来跟我们有一些可能会有一些，当然很多人都是我们很长时间的朋友但是也可能会有一些新的朋友。那么让我花几分钟时间来介绍一下我们 Alliances for Impact。Alison 下一页。Alliances for Impact。AFI 原来是华人咖啡俱乐部，是美国联邦及纽约州政府批准的501c3非营利公益组织。我们的宗旨呢是宣传以华裔为主的亚裔群体对当地社会的贡献，增强亚裔群体对主流社会的影响力，并提高亚裔群体整体的社会地位。我们呢通过举办丰富多彩的线下主题活动和线上的讲座，以及针对亚裔群体需求的各种职场沟通以及领导力的培训项目。AFI 呢帮助北美华人拓宽视野和人脉，提高职业发展，寻找事业的合作机会，进一步促进华人抱团取暖，携手共赢。同时我们的思维学院呢是 AFI 教育领域的非盈利合作伙伴。我们致力于将最优质的财商、投资、沟通、领导力以及职场教育，用最浅显易懂的方式带入 K12 的学员以及成年人的课堂。我们学院旗下呢有成年投资、职场领导力培训 K12 课程，包括华尔街少年 Wall Street for Kids 和青少年沟通、青少年创业及领导力各个项目多个系列项目。好，请翻下一页。我快速的分享一下我们最近的一些业绩和影响首先，在过去的4年里头 ，AFI 建立了一个超过5万人的在线社群，总共有140多个不同主题的微信群，针对当下的热点话题举办各种的讨论。我们同时呢，从2020年的3月份开始，我们就举办了200多场线上的公益讲座，被誉为专门为北美亚裔家庭准备的知识盛宴。同时现在我们有一个云健身的公益课程，这个云健身的公益课程每天都有各种各样的瑜伽、舞蹈、武术、太极、冥想等免费课程，每一周呢参加的人数大概有1500人，平均每场都有200多人在线。思慧学院呢也为了3000多名成年和青少年提供了高质量的课程，包括了软实力、财商、投资、领导力和政治领导力、创业、写作、辩论等等。同时还带着青少年参加了各种商业和投资比赛。那我们的亲子学院呢，现在也非常的活跃为家庭呢提供了全方位的互助和知识的分享，包括自闭症的互助群、ADHD 互助组、幼儿故事活动、单亲的爸爸妈妈养娃经验分享。每周4呢，我们还有亲子的炉边夜话，每一个月有2次的周日心理健康读书会。好，下面我来预告一下我们后几天的一些精彩的一些分享首先周5呢是一位非常年轻的 Gabby 她是我们华裔的骄傲，才33岁就做到了DVF 全球的总裁，所以非常期待她的这个精彩分享这么年轻就能够做到这么高的级别，我们就希望多多的看到我们华裔能够冲破这些所谓的天花板，能够走到职场的高端。周6呢，我们请到了徐在伟导师来教我们大家如何帮助孩子们认识到冲动和察觉冲动，在冲动控制的技巧方面做一些行动之前的思考，也欢迎大家来参加这是周6。那么周日呢，我相信毛妈是大家很多女性都非常熟悉的，在周日下午的2点，我们邀请到了毛妈来分享她的精彩故事。好，那么下面我来分享一下，跟大家介绍一下我们 IvyCompass。今天晚上的分享是由我们 IvyCompass 指南针的教育咨询机构来重磅推出的这一个项目呢其实我们 IvyCompass 呢前身是海域的国际教育集团，我们的宗旨其实是根据家庭的需求衍生出来的另外一个小平台。这个小平台呢是专门为升学而准备和计划和管理推出的。那么我们主要的工作呢是过滤那些口碑比较好的和最好的前藤校招生官以及独立的升学顾问，还有对接一些呢优质的辅导课程以及竞赛等教育这个资源。 为孩子升学保驾护航。同时，我们还会连接 AFI Wise 的这些资源，给我们孩子在这个志愿者、领导力还有其他软实力提升方面提供一些帮助。那今天晚上呢，实际上就是在我们众多研发和开发定制化的背景提升项目的之一啊。今天晚上我们是非常高兴和荣幸邀请到了哈佛大学的教授Dr. Debora Phillips。Dr. Debora Phillips is graduate from MIT as a city planning and also PhD. She's been working with Dr. Ellen Langer in her lab for positive psychology for many, many years. So tonight she's going to be introduced for the student in high school about introduction to health and positive psychology framework. So Alison, let's go into a little bit detail about the project. Next page, please. Okay, so this project is IvyCompass research program. The topic for research is called Introduction to Health and Positive Psychology Framework. So we're trying to invite those high school students from 9th grade to 11th grade. Those students might be interested in future going to apply for college in psychology, public health, or pre-med path interested high school student. The whole project is going to be scheduled for 11 weeks and totally 12 sessions. Every session is 90 minutes. So this time we are trying to focus on smaller group of students to enhance the positive quality and also experience. So we're only inviting 6 to 8 students to be in that program. After the program, the deliverable is we're hoping under the Dr. Debora Phillips, you will be able to develop minimum 5 pages essay or prepare a proposal for next deeper research project. For those excellent students during the process of research, you will be obtaining Dr. Phillips the recommendation letter. Hold on one second. Somebody trying to call. Okay, so also our team is going to help the student towards end, help them to find a way to publish a paper. If the paper quality is good enough, our team is going to have someone going to help them finding those suitable channels to publish their paper. So no further ado, let me pass on the floor to Debora, Dr. Phillips, to help us to give us introduction and detail explaining how she's going to be leading the facilitation of this research project. Now, Debora, it's your floor. Hold on one second for Dr. Phillips to share screen. And you can unmute yourself, please.
Hi, everyone.
Hello.
I'm going to share my screen now, and I will hopefully everybody can see that. Please let me know if there's a problem at any point during the presentation. And I think, Sophia, the way you want to do this is that I'm going to speak for a little while, and people can put some questions in the chat.
Yes.
And you'll keep track of them. So we will talk about them later.
Yes.
So hi, everybody. My name is Deb Phillips. I'm a postdoctoral scholar at Harvard University in the Department of Psychology. As Sophia mentioned, I work in the lab of Professor Ellen Langer, who is a very well-known social cognitive psychologist. She's been with Harvard for over 40 years and has probably about 45 years worth of research in her field. I've been there for about 10 years. So I'll go forward. Today, I think what I'm going to do is just talk a little bit about the what, about the basics of psychology and research using a social and cognitive psychology to improve our health. So what this course does is to introduce students to health psychology, something that they've probably had bits of in their middle school, and if they're in 10th grade, their 9th grade education, but that it's really as as a topic, not something that they've been particularly deeply introduced to. Why do I want to talk about psychology, and why do I think it's important to do this with students in this age group is because the psychology, which is not something I studied when I was very young personally, I came to it when I was older, is very important to personal development. And it doesn't matter what career students go into. And the longer I teach at Harvard and the more students I interact with, because I do recruiting for MIT at the high school level for college entrance, the more I believe that having exposure to this field is actually very important for their development. And then we get to the how of what universities do to help these young adult learners frame the field and frame research. So that's what we're going to talk a little bit about today. A little bit about me. I have a lot of boys in my family, as you can see. So I have 4 sons, and they have lots of friends. And so we have a pretty busy household for the most part. I am, as I mentioned, I'm a research associate, and I'm also a teaching instructor in social and health psychology at Harvard. I focus on what we call learning-based cognitive methodologies, primarily in health, education, and business. And my focus areas reflect an early career concern with health when I was at MIT in the planning and Sloan School type of endeavors. And then I spent in a more eclectic background about 20 years in senior management in business endeavors. I worked in large foundations and multinationals and in consulting firms. The last role I had before I left to go to Harvard was as a COO of a very large foundation called the Atlantic Philanthropies, which was a $5 billion Sunset Foundation started by Chuck Feeney, who started duty-free shops. And I came to that out of about 10 years in financial services in New York as a managing director at a big money center bank. So I've had a relatively eclectic career. I came to academia, back to academia after that. So I have a little bit of a different background, which luckily for me, Harvard was very open about engaging and re-engaging me in academia. So that's sort of my little elevator speech about myself. And as I said, at the end, I'm happy to answer any questions about my own background as well as the course. So let's start with why. Why is psychology important? A lot of parents, and I speak as a parent as well, we're really sort of, unless some of you are psychology majors or have been in the university level, a lot of us don't really know why it's so important other than if we have a problem. But really what it does, the exposure to this field helps provide a way to develop multiple views of the world. You know, it helps us to understand other people, other people's perspectives. It helps us develop levels of empathy and sympathy that we might not be focused on, because especially at this age, people are very focused on themselves, appropriately, but not unreasonably, without the developmental needs to develop sympathy and empathy for others. And it helps provide a context for the life choices that people are going to make. It serves as a background for people who wish to be leaders, for people who wish to be in the medical industry, for people who want to go into education, and for people who want to go into research. And as somebody who's touched in a few of these, I can tell you that earlier exposure to sort of the principles of psychological inquiry and the importance of those principles would have made my early career more engaged and less stressful, which we'll talk about a little bit as well. So most importantly is that, and this is something I focus on a lot in this class, is that psychology helps us with uncertainty. People tend to be very worried about not knowing. And no more in the field of psychology do we learn that everything is uncertain, that no one knows everything, no one actually knows anything, for sure, that errors are opportunities to learn and to change, and that it helps us to help ourselves and to help others navigate and to experience life. So it is a way of framing the world that we don't know by understanding the world that we try to understand. So it's an important concept to try to work with. And what we get with uncertainty, the more we can accept uncertainty, the more open-minded we become. Open-mindedness is sort of a catch-all phrase to help people understand the importance of being open to whatever is going to happen. The more open we are, the more opportunity we have to see, the more opportunity we have to hear, the more opportunity we have to learn. So if we do nothing else in college, we should encourage our children to take one psych class in college, because if for no other reason, then it will expose them to different kinds of people and different ways of looking and thinking about the world. There are other subjects that tangentially do that. Psychology is one of those subjects that can do it in a little bit different way. So what does this mean for research and things that are, for many of your children, something that is important? And when my youngest was the same, and is a little bit older than your children, when he was about their age, he suddenly decided he was interested in research, which shocked me. But why? Why was that important, and what is important about that? It is our way, really simply, of finding and telling stories to each other. What is going on? What do? We ask questions. We generate hypotheses. We test those hypotheses to varying degrees of experimentation, because not every experiment is created equal. And then we ask more questions. What do we think about what happened? Why do we think it happened? Why do we think it's still happening? And how does it happen at a micro level? What the researchers call looking for mechanisms or moderators in scientific research is really, it's asking the questions of what's going on, why is it going on, and how is it happening? And that's basically what research is. So we learn how to, ask some interesting questions and test what those questions mean. In social psychology and cognitive psychology, we're trying to figure out what people are thinking, why do they think that way, and how are they actually trying to think about it. So that's our key sort of frame for what we want to do when we talk about research. What does this mean for the topics that we're going to cover? In health psychology, and it's hard to give high school students a basics in a class that you would cover 25 hours in the classroom, but we're going to cover 3 areas that are, I think, of critical importance to introducing students in the field, whether they're going to be in psychology or public health or pre-med. And I've had students that have done all of those things, as well as biomedical engineering and similar types of endeavors, neuroscience, a lot of neuroscientists. So we're going to focus on medical data, errors, decisions, and communication, because we want students to understand how to look at information, not to take information for granted, not to understand what it means to make errors in medical data, what medical decisions look like, what do decision trees look like, how do doctors talk to each other, how do doctors and patients communicate with each other. All of those things are critical to our understanding of what a healthcare system looks like, regardless of the role that you're playing. Academically as well, understanding the role of placebos and what we can do, what are placebos in not just a pharmacological experiment, but in a psychological experiment, because in the last 50 years, what psychology has done is introduce the concept of a psychological placebo, which speaks to what we can do when we think we can, a theory called mind-body unity. And it is of critical importance to introduce students to that concept. And last, one of the things that we think is very important, especially for this age group, starting at this age group, is stress. What is stress? How do we talk about it? How do we measure it? What can positive psychology tell us about how to handle stress and how to dissipate stress? And all of these will help them personally learn some basics about how to optimize health for themselves and for others. So what they will take from this, and they can the way I like to do this is I like for them to get engaged in the content of the course. Over the first few weeks, they generally will have some experience, looking more in depth at each of these areas, finding something that they personally feel engaged with and interested in, and then they can take the rest of the course to learn how to create a PowerPoint or a 5-page essay for publication, or for something they can use in their travels with potential colleges later on, or even if they pursue courses in high school like AP Science Research, this can be, if they're early enough in their careers, a basis for looking at faculty at other universities with whom they can work over the course of their high school AP Science Research careers. They can also, if they're so inclined, develop a research proposal or a poster that can be used, again, as Sophia mentioned, with publications or in competitions, which, as you know, exists sometime in the 11th to 12th grade years in high school. So that's really what they are going to build, and the content that they're going to use is going to be based on the academic curriculum within which they will have their own choice of what to focus on. So the learning outcomes then, for the class are really, it's a focus on health psychology, but it also focuses on opening up student minds by introducing them to the field, but also to giving them a practical introduction to what health psychology is, its interdisciplinary nature, including what we call in the Langer Lab Langerian mindfulness, which is non-meditative, meaning it is not focused on meditation. Not that there's anything wrong with that. A lot of us do meditate, but we focus more on the cognitive processes and cognitive ways of retaining and attaining cognitive flexibility in our mindfulness approach. So they will receive some traditional models and theories, and some interventions for health promotion and illness prevention. We have a lot of research, in my own personal area in health is chronic illness. So I have a lot of personal experience currently and over the last several years doing work in illnesses like ALS and multiple sclerosis and Parkinson's disease and similar chronic type of illnesses. So they will learn about interventions for that, and that will help, as well as other illnesses that they may be interested in. They will carry out practical exercises during the class with a focus on health, and they'll be introduced to developing what a real essay might look like on a health psychology topic, or a short research proposal, as I mentioned. So they'll understand and be able to utilize what I've referred to as these interventions for mind-body unity, and how to promote health. And we'll have a personal essay or a research proposal that they can then submit either for competition or as an adjunct to their application process. Let's see. So what we're going to do in terms of the structure of the class is, for each class, there is in-class discussion and practice. I've developed some thought-provoking exercises for students to do in class after doing reading for each class that I've tested with other students in research type environments, but they are intended to be engaging and fun in the sense so that students become engaged with them. Homework will you look like a short one-page reflection to discuss in the next class. So participation in these classes is important for them, and to prepare them to do that, they'll write a short one-pager so that they can share with each other what they have learned from the reading, and then we can make it a focus for that class discussion. That's one of the reasons that the classes are 90 minutes. So it gives them a chance to think, to talk with each other, and to share with each other, which is usually, in my experience teaching at with this age group or people a little bit older, but really there isn't a significant difference age-wise, the most beneficial for the students. And then out of that will be their 5-page essay or proposal that they will be able to write. So we will really be able to focus then on the importance of thinking. You know, one of the things that I knew I wanted to stress tonight actually with you is that it's really important for students to question what they've been taught. You know, we know that your children are really good students, and people that apply to schools like MIT and Harvard are really, really good students. We know that they can take tests. What we're interested in is what questions they have. Do they ask why? You know, what are they interested in? So when they're in these types of situations where they're thinking about where they want to go to school or what they want to do with their education, it's very important, in addition to their academic performance, for them to be both questioning what they're learning and to be open to multiple explanations for things. That the search for causation, as we have, you know, in many hard sciences, but equally in psychology, believe it or not, is less important to some of us than the cognitive flexibility with which we look for answers. Which answers make sense, in what context do they make sense, and why are they making sense? So basically, we want to hear questions more than we want to hear their answers. We know they can answer questions. You know, most of the students, most of your children are very well trained and high performers, and they've learned how to do that. And what they'll find in college, and what they'll find in the application process to college, and what they'll find in life is the more open they are to seeing different ways of looking at the world, the more they'll, you know, be able to participate in different types of experiences. So that cannot be underestimated. And what I wanted to do for a few minutes, it's a little difficult to do it in this type of Zoom session, but I want to explore a little bit with you of the course for at least a few minutes. All right, so I'd like you to play along with me. And some of you may have seen some of these things, and that's fine too. But let's play along with me for fun for a few minutes. So why do we use mindfulness as a focus to health psychology and a positive psychology approach? What is it? Langerian mindfulness, as I mentioned, Langer Lab at Harvard, it's 45 years of research. And one of the most important things that I learned early on was that when Ellen Langer was at Yale doing her graduate degree, you know, a lot of people were interested, as social psychologists are, in what people are doing and why are they doing it, and what are they thinking and why are they thinking those things. And what she asked as a predecessor question is whether people were actually thinking at all. And so her work in cognitive psychology started with the idea of mindlessness as opposed to mindfulness. Why are people so mindful? And that's what we're going to do for a couple minutes here. So I'm going to show you something, and you may or may not have seen it before. If you've seen it before because you've been in some other event where this has been shown, then you'll understand why I'm showing it. So I'm going to show you a picture, you know, and what we say is, you know, so do you know what this is? It's like a really nice little psychological picture, you know, and most people are like, yeah, well, I don't know. I have no idea what it is. Okay, so you don't know what it is. And then I show you what it is. So now I can't do this as a more interactive seminar, but what you see is a cow, right? Now you can see all the outlines of the cow, you know what it is, so what happens is that once we are told what something is, then we can see it, right? The next time you see it, you will know what it is. You know that's a cow now. You can't unsee it, right? You'll not, if I came back here in 10 years and I asked you what this was, you would say it's a cow because you know it was a cow because I just told you it was a cow. So we see something, we're told something what it is, we retain what that is, and we can't lose it. So now we don't see anything else but the cow. Right, so now I'm going to show you is something I want you to read. So I want you to close your eyes for a second, then I'll tell you when to open them. I just want you to read it really quickly once, and then I want you to stop, and then I want you to read it again. All right, so just close your eyes if you would like to play along. If you don't want to, then you don't have to. All right, so now read it quickly. Open and read quickly. All right. Now, how many of you read it? Can you see what's wrong with the words on this poster? All right, as opposed to, can you see what's wrong though with words on this poster? We do this all the time with people in these small settings and almost to a person, because we all think we know what we're going to see. We're all used to reading stuff like this. So we say, can you see what's wrong with the words on this poster? But we're not really reading the words that are on the poster in the right order. We do this in research where we do things pretty quickly with people to see how often it happens. It happens many, many more times than you would think. I'm going to do another one that's more for our mathematically inclined, spatially inclined people. So I ask students, like, how many squares do you see, right? It's a three-dimensional figure, right? So usually people, they'll come up, they'll say, well, there's 6. Okay, that's fine. So then I ask them how many now there are. I ask them again. And what we see is that depending on the way the objects are being viewed, they will come up with different answers. All right, they're really not different, but they appear to be different. So sometimes it looks like 6, sometimes it looks like 7, sometimes it looks like 9. We can draw it so that it looks like 12. All right, and the only difference is the perspective that we are taking. And the major point that we're making is that it is context that determines the assessment that we are making of what is going on in a situation. And if we change the context, we're going to change the assessment. And we mostly go into life feeling that there's only one way, right? So as the last one, all right, I'm going to ask you, by now you probably know, how much is 1 plus 1? If we were in a seminar, I get a few people that would raise their hands a little fearfully, and because everybody in the room knows that the answer cannot possibly be 2, right? Because you already been told that everything you've seen isn't real, right? So it's not that it isn't 2, it's just that it depends on the context, right? So it's 2 if you're in the base 10 number system, it's 10 if you're in the base 2 number system. If you have 1 wad of chewing gum in one hand and 1 wad of chewing gum in another hand, and you smash your hands together like this, 1 and 1 is equal to 1. So if you don't find out what the context is of the question, if you don't find out what the baseline is of the data that you're looking at, if you don't understand what the denominator is, right, then you don't know what the answer is, because there's more than one answer, and answers are context dependent. And the more that students understand this, the more, and the younger they are when they understand it, the more they will question things. The better students they will be, the better researchers they will be, the better doctors they will be. A lot of the students in the health course that Ellen Langer teaches at Harvard and the students that I have at Harvard, a lot of them do want to be doctors. Most of them want to be really good doctors, and they don't know what they're missing because they've spent 4 years trying to get A's in order to get into medical school. These things are important for them to learn, even if they're not sure how they're going to use it quite yet. So what do we do? We teach them that first, we don't know. So I tell them, first, remember when you were 2 years old and you always asked why. Remember to ask why. Then we're taught in an absolute way. This is what this is. Now, it's not that this isn't what it is. It's just this is what it is because, or in this context. So we're taught in an absolute way. Then we think we know. Then we stop paying attention because we think we know. And a lot, especially in health, health psychology, positive psychology, but a lot in health is that we have to be paying attention. If the doctor has a checklist and doesn't look at the patient, then the doctor's going to probably miss something. So before we stop, I wanted to show this to you. If I can make this little 2-minute clip work. If you've seen this, then you know why I'm showing it. It's just a 2-minute clip. So the reason that I showed this is because I don't know how many of you, because we're not in a seminar type of situation, but a lot of the time, most of the time, people miss the gorilla. People can see this even more than once and miss the gorilla when they even know they should be paying attention and looking for the gorilla, because if they haven't seen it for a while, they forget and they go back to focusing on counting the passes, because that's what they think they're supposed to do. And that's what they think is important. So the more we can help students understand that what people tell you is important, may be important, but it may not be the only important thing, and it may not be the most important thing, then they will start thinking earlier, questioning earlier, right? And then they will be able to better understand, for example, that medical data can be misleading. It is not that it is all wrong, although we do have plenty of examples of, mindless errors. And medical errors, as probably some of you know, are rampant due to mindlessness, ours and our doctors. So how do we help people become more cognizant of what medical data is when a doctor gives you information, or when you're on WebMD all night trying to figure out what your problem is? How misleading is that information? How complete is it? How incomplete is it? How many people get this tumor? It depends. What does it depend on? How many people showed up to the hospital? What's your baseline? You have a certain bias in the sample. So if it's 50% of the people get this tumor that survive, you only have your 100% of your population is not 100% of the population. It's of a specific sample population. So we want them to understand, like we want everybody to understand how to question these types of things. All right, stress. This is a big thing for all of us, but it's a big thing for students. And the more I talk to students, and I as I said, I work a little bit with high school students outside of the research context, but also I've been a mentor to several high school students who have done research over the last few years. Most of them are pretty stressed. in advance of the college application process, and because they want to do well, because they're interested in doing well. So I help them. I ask them to go into a breakout room on Zoom. I ask them to tell me how stressed they are about this term from 0 to 10, just to see how many of them are stressed. You'd be surprised how high their stress levels are. All right, so we help. We'll talk about events don't cause stress. Our views of events cause stress, and we can control our views. These are basic concepts in psychology that are seldom used for these purposes, but it helps introduce them to concepts that impact our health, that are of critical importance in the world of research, and that are a little unique for people their age. But it's an extreme view. Disease is increasingly linked to stress, heart disease and other diseases. It's really a function of stress, we think. It plays a much bigger role than the medical community is willing to admit, and the medical community has come very far in the last 20 years in research and clinical work generally, in attributing a lot of disease to stress. So that is a big area quite often for students because it's something they're personally interested in, right? Examples of assignments, happiness exercises. Maybe they're crazy, maybe they're soft, but there's no downside to trying them. It's important for them to try things that they think are going to be fun, because then they will experience them that way. All right, so I'll do things like I'll say authentically compliment 3 people between now and next week. 3 people that you don't know necessarily that well. But if that's what you come across, just be genuine, don't make it forced, and then think about how you feel about it afterwards. So tell us tomorrow, tell us next week. These are the things that they get to try, that then they become really surprised when it becomes something that is different, and it opens up their mind. And this is what we call the psychology of possibility. Now, I can't do that with you tonight, but a lot of the research that I will introduce to them is research that's based on, why are we so sure we can improve vision beyond 2020, think ourselves thin, reverse brain damage, because we need to free ourselves from constricting mindsets. And possibility happens when we recognize the difference between what is uncontrollable and what is indeterminate. So what are statistics? Statistics are probabilities. What's the difference between that and certainty? So the idea is that while we may not be able to control something now, it doesn't mean we won't be able to control it in the future. And that is really the primary goal of helping them understand what health psychology is, what positive psychology is, and how they can use it, to pursue their own interests in the field. And I think that's where we will stop today. So shall we take questions?
Yes. Thank you, Dr. Phillips. That was wonderful. I learned a lot. I just wanted to tell the participants, if you have any questions, you're welcome to raise your hand and also open up a mic. I would like you to have a direct dialogue with Dr. Phillips. But I also, in between, I will go through the chat box to read some of the questions. Meanwhile, some of the audience might be thinking about having a conversation with you. I'm going through the question in the. I know there's maybe some audience also coming from China, so they're asking what time is the class session going to be held. At this moment, because we're considering there's some student could be coming from the West Coast and Canada, and also possibility of China. So we wanted to right now focusing on possibility of considering Dr. Phillips is also very, very busy. She has 3 major research projects going on right now, and besides the teaching at Harvard. So we're planning to hold a Saturday morning Eastern Standard Time, 10 to 11:30. So being in mind, the session is 90 minutes per session. So starting dates is April, we're thinking April the 16th. So once a week, you're only meeting with the professor once a week. The majority of 80% and 90% of the work is done offline. That's what we call PBL. PBL is project-based learning, meaning professor is not coming to teach you anything, but professor is going to poking to really encourage you thinking. A lot of the research, a lot of the paper, a lot of work has to be done offline. Okay, so professors meeting with you once a week. Right now Saturday, but we can see there's a possibility of discussing another time. Okay, so this answers that question. How do I sign up program? You can either to scan this to fill the form. You can see right now on the screen, there's left-hand side, there's a barcode. You can scan that and fill the form. And then we can follow up afterwards. And you can also add our WeChat to discuss with us personally, individually. Okay. And also Philip Wang asking, is this an independent project? Can we apply for this project independently? Yes, absolutely you can. This is open to the student, belong to IvyCompass. Also, you're welcome to join us from other company as well. This is an independent research project. Okay. Molly is asking how much it cost. You can add my WeChat. We can discuss with that with you off the session. Let me see. Is this presentation available after the seminar? You can also add on WeChat to us, and we may be able to share with you after discuss with Dr. Phillips. Okay. Deborah, there's a participant asking from Heidi Pan. How will we be assisted in our research paper writing process?
Well, so the idea here is to come up, I mean, it's a very short paper because especially if your students are in 9th or 10th grade, they're not used to really writing research papers, but we need to introduce them to what the components are of a paper. And so all of that has to be done by giving them the structure of what a paper looks like, and then talking. I mean, this is what I do with students. I have to help them understand, which is not easy if they've never done research, right? To be able to help them understand what's a research question. It's not a research methods class. So, this would be more or less of an introduction to what's your topic? What do you think is an important question? Introduce them to what a search of the literature is, which is what they would typically do in at least 10th grade if they were in a science research class in high school. Learn how to do a little bit of a literature review to come up with a really good question that they can then answer. They can't answer the question by taking part in this class, but they can put together a first research essay proposal that will help them get to an answer. As opposed to writing an essay that says, take a topic about stress, and I want you, and then figuring out what part of that they want to do a paper on, which is equally valuable as an adjunct to an application, as opposed to, taking it the next step, which might be to actually do a research project.
Okay, does that answer your question?
So I have to get them to I have to get them so that they can get to the second step if they really want to do research.
Okay. Now I'm going to open mic for Sharon Gao. Sharon Gao, you are able to unmute yourself and you're able to speak directly, please. Sharon.
Hi.
Hi.
Thanks for the good talk. I do have a question about, when Dr. Phillips gave the instruction to the student, would that be like a group, just a group discussion format, or it is like one-on-one discussion or instructions?
Well, the class is in a small group class. That's why the class is small. So in this case, it's a small group class. I'll have to take time with each student, individually in different points, because the final session of the class is students actually presenting what they've learned. to their fellow students. But I have to take time with each student to answer their individual questions, because they're presumably not going to be doing the same thing with each other, because it's individual projects. So it has to be a combination of engaging them with each other, but then if they have questions on their own, that they have to be answered individually.
Okay. And Dr. Phillips, do you think they can, if they just Google the materials, would that be sufficient, or they actually have to access to certain like journals, professional publications?
For their own paper or for the class?
For their own paper.
Well, for their own paper, it's not, peer-reviewed journals is not likely, because those are usually either a combination of actual research that's done, and in that would be the next step, or review papers, which are done by people like me who are reviewing, doing meta-analyses of other people's research, as well as their own. But there are other outlets that for students who are young like this, who can publish before they're actually doing a lot of research. So we have to, that's what I'll work with Sophia and her team to identify, depending on what the students' interests are, where those outlets might be.
Correct.
Okay.
What I'd like to do is give them enough information so that they know what kind of a research methods class do they want to take. Like my son, before he went into, he was a neuroscience, he wanted to learn about the pathology of Alzheimer's disease, and he just wanted to do the hard science part of that. When I watched him in 10th grade go through journal articles, and, he could understand the math part of it. And, it takes a long time to learn that. That's step 2. And that takes 6 months for 10th grade students to learn how to do that. If they're doing, hard science or social science, because you have to learn how to read a research paper, and then you have to learn how to combine what they all say and figure out why your question is interesting and important. Research is not only about asking a question, it's really also about asking a question that's important, that people are interested in. So it's an introduction, more or less, and I think there's a question like this on the chat, to what are the things we need to learn in order to write a research paper? What's the structure of it look like?
Okay, so how could they know that, for example, they come up with some conclusions or their own analysis that have been already published, or already in the common domain? So whether they, how they know that their ideas are novel or not?
Well, that's why they need to talk to people like me, or if they're in a different field, if they end up in a really different field outside of what I do, they'll have to deal with with a mentor.
Okay.
Usually, because you really need to have somebody who understands the field that they're in. So if somebody, like I do a lot of work with neuroscientists, because I happen to deal with neuromuscular diseases, but I'm not a neuroscientist. So if somebody's interested in the pure neuroscience track, then they're going to need to talk to people who have done things like the Bayesian brain.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yeah, I just wanted to emphasize, Debora, I think throughout the time working with us, she's best emphasized on, through this session, the high school student will learn how to ask input questions and also learn how research should be conducted. So to prepare them, even the skill, until they go into colleges, will be a lot of projects they have to be working on. So build a strong foundation for them to working on continuously until they reach to college, college time. So that's something I take away. Okay, JK, you were asking if you cannot make it this time, can you make the next one? Yes, in the future, we will be continue working with Dr. Phillips to see any other availability of her time and squeeze out of her busy schedule. Maybe we will be hosting second or third session, if there's more student interested into this type of subject of PBL project. Okay, so yes, they will be having more opportunity. Okay, and Lin Chu is asking, this course is good for what age group? Right now, we're thinking by talk to Dr. Phillips is 9th grade to 11th. Okay, 9th grade to 11th. Because 12th grade, obviously, they will be very busy doing application season, may not have enough time. But then I remember John Morganelli, if you're on this session also listening, I remember he said, as long as the hit button of submitting your common application is not hit, you are still able to doing this project. And then even not finish this project. I remember John said, you can still credit this experience into your portfolio as a strong evidence of you have deep engagement of your interest in this path, in this subject. So it's pretty much for the whole entire high school, if you think you have time. Okay. Somebody asking if there's a Chinese translation. I'm afraid no, because you can see this is a US college application process where are helping students to be more competitive. And the facilitator and coach is speak English, and we don't want to have a Chinese translation in the parallel to make more time consuming and difficult for the thinking process. So this will be conducted 100% English. So I want to clarify that.
But let me also, make a little kind of make a couple of comments now, Sophia, about the stuff. So, there's a lot of different things in research, and students are oriented different ways. So, there are some students who are oriented more quantitatively and some who are oriented more qualitatively. And depending upon what their path is, both options are available and important to do. Research has really emerged, in the social sciences over the last 50 years to incorporate a lot of qualitative as well as quantitative work. So people, students need to figure out what they're interested in and what they're capable of doing. 9th graders are not 11th graders. So, depending on what their exposure is to different kinds of quantitative methods, they're going to be ready to do different things, and that's okay. We want this experience for them to be helpful for the process of their college applications, but we also, at least I also, want this to be very personally beneficial for them, something that they're going to take with them after they're done with the applications and through their college careers. That's a positive way of looking at this stuff. That's not overwhelming. Everybody can do research.
Very good. Okay. Now I'm going to give opportunity to one of the participants, Lin Chu. You can open up your mic and have a discussion with Dr. Phillips, ask questions.
Hi, Dr. Phillips. Thank you for your seminar's presentation. Actually, asked one question already. What is good for the age group? But my daughter is going to 9th grade coming September, and she's very interested in college. Do you think she can join, or maybe wait till she got in 9th grade? Or
because she's finishing 8th grade now?
Yeah.
It really depends on her background. I would suggest, and Sophia, if you're sharing the syllabus that I put together, it may be beneficial for her to look at the syllabus and see if these are the kinds of things that will be beneficial and not intimidating. We want students to benefit from this and not be intimidated by it. But if she can, no, I'm going to provide. I don't expect the students to buy a ton of books or read a ton of articles. There are some articles that I am going to provide for them that they should read. And they're not highly quantitative. Nobody needs to be, have 3, years of statistics to do it. It's not important that, I would like them to buy 1 or 2 books, but, it has to be optional. So, those things are on the syllabus. If your daughter is, you think, ready for that and has the time to do it over, again, it's an 11 to 12 week class. then that's fine. If she needs to wait a year, that's fine too.
Right.
Okay, yeah, I think that's good. Let her look at it first and see if it's or not.
Yeah, Lee, you can either add my WeChat or Allison's WeChat, and both of us will be able to provide you some of the detailed information, and then you can evaluate. And we're hoping Dr. Phillips will be also have time for us next year. If he becomes 9th grade, maybe she has opportunity to join then. Could be.
Okay, and the course will be designed to level up, or basically it's like a same course is repeating, or
Good question. Maybe repeating, and we also will discuss with Dr. Phillips to develop a different subject. So we may be parallel, meaning we will be repeating the same thing to have more students have opportunity to join, because this is like foundation, like what Deborah said, is going to be teach them how research foundation methodology is. But at the same time, we might also throughout the time develop some other subject for her to leading the research project.
Yeah, I mean, there's a more advanced version of research, that obviously is, like I said, step 2 to developing a full research proposal. What does that look like in psychology, and et cetera, et cetera. So some of that, and they can develop a full protocol. You can publish protocols.
That's great. And the courses will be because high schools also offer like AP classes, the psychologists. Is there any difference? Or I believe it is definitely an enhancement for that, but I just want to know if there any difference,
between AP Science research and this?
Yeah.
Yeah, AP Science research is like a 2-year commitment for a student, right?
Yeah.
So 10th, really a 3-year commitment. So 10th and 11th grade, they are figuring out how to do a literature review, putting together a research proposal, trying to find a mentor in a university. Then they're doing their research, at some different points of the time in the summer, on vacations during 11th and 12th grade. And by 12th grade, they're applying to competitions and, using the research that they're doing in a lab in an academic setting. So it's an intense, single subject research project that they're able to do, through either a lab in an academic institution with somebody like me, or usually a postdoc, or something like that. So it's a big commitment in a particular area. When I've done that, I've actually mentored the students in those AP research classes, because they've had to, develop what that is. So this is like a foundational course, as Sophia said, for something that can then be on a secondary level. How do you really develop a research proposal? Because what I find with some students is that unless you're doing a hard science project, they don't know what a research proposal looks like. What do I need to do? What's an experiment look like? They don't know what research methods are, and they're not supposed to. They're kids. They need to know what a research project looks like. What's an experiment? If I'm not, and even when I'm putting stuff into a test tube, they still don't know what the steps of an experiment are. What makes an experiment versus a chat? And those are basic things that I think they're expected to pick up on their own in AP Science research.
Okay, great. So this is just basically in the late, the foundation, for those classes, right? So when higher grade, they make them easier, right? Make life easier, and okay.
Yes. Also, I want to mention, we are also working with Dr. Phillips on 1-1, meaning if timing is not so suitable for your child activities are so packed up, there is possibility, talk to us, we are working with you. We are here to serving you. We're here to help you to gaining the resource experience. So talk to us, we will do everything we can to make the schedule suitable for your child. So there is possibility of talking to Dr. Phillips for one-on-one session. Okay. Okay, just want to mention that. Before some of the parents leave it away, I just want to mention I had a great opportunity to meet with Debora a couple years ago, participating. I just want to show there's some books. I know it's hard to see. Dr. Ellen Langer, I know it's but just go search up. Dr. Ellen Langer is the first female professor on Harvard. And also, she wrote many books. One is counterclockwise. There's a possibility 叫生命的另一种可能，还有一个 book 叫专念创造力，mindfulness. I know it's kind of very hard to see, but I'll be happy to type it into the WeChat to let you know. So Dr. Phillips is working with actually Ellen Langer. So there's a lot of opportunity if you going through that learning with her. There's a lot of possibility, you know what I'm saying, in the future for other research project possibilities. I just wanted to mention that. Okay, let me go to next. I think this question is really good. I wanted to ask you. My child is interested. Kind of jumped. Hold on one second. Yeah, will you touch it? Okay, my child is interested in behavior economics, social or consumer psychology. Is this the right course for her?
What did you behavioral economics and what?
Social.
Yeah, that's what this is. Yeah. First, Ellen Langer is the sort of the mother of behavioral economics, and some of the work that we do, which is in here. I can't see it on the syllabus at this time. Is with a professor at Duke called Dan Ariely, who's a behavioral psychologist, and they're economists basically. So a lot of the basics of what we do on the mindfulness side actually deals with behavioral economics. Like Richard Thaler in Nudge on the marketing side. He's a professor at the business school at Harvard. A lot of these are very much linked together. They're interrelated. They are not the same, but they are interrelated. And social psychology is basically where Ellen Langer resides on the Harvard faculty.
Okay.
So that's where I am.
Philip Wang asking, is psychology very popular in Harvard and hard to get in?
Well, Harvard is hard to get into. I think that psychology is fairly popular. I would say it's a fabulous department. And I tell this to students who are at Harvard who are not sure what they want to concentrate in. They have some really phenomenal faculty there. And so it's fairly popular. I think that depending on what your child wants to do, I find that there's a lot of what they call primary and secondary concentrations. So I may have a fair number of students who are neuroscience majors, and then they are secondaries in psychology, or they're pre-med and they're secondaries in psychology, which means basically that's a minor for them, but they want to take enough classes to really get engaged with it. So, not all of them are doing social, but a fair number of them do. And, Ellen Langer teaches obviously some great classes, one in decision making, that's basically a fundamentals behavioral economics class, and one in health psych. Steven Pinker is a world-renowned psychologist who is at Harvard, who just teaches fundamental psychology. He teaches freshmen. So it's a great place. And from that perspective, it's popular, but, Harvard's a big place. So I can't tell you it's the most popular.
I saw John responded to me. John, if you're still here, it's kind of honor to have you here. Do you want to open mic to maybe ask some question for your student, since Dr. Phillips is here? I can unmute you. All right, go ahead, John. I am on you. So
Hi, Sophia.
Hi,
Deborah. Fantastic presentation. Thank you so much. I really enjoyed it. No, I guess my question would be, from your perspective, Deborah, what are reasonable questions, right, for high school students to, could you give a few examples, maybe within the context of economics or social psychology? That would be great.
Sure.
Deborah, let me jump in. John is our exclusive, very much loved, popular counselor. He was the Cornell admission director, and he helped many students going to their dream school. So we are very happy to work with him. So when he asks questions, he's asking good questions.
That's great. That's great. And I'll tell you, my favorite example of something like this is something I saw from two different students. One was in an AP Science research class in high school, and it graduated. Now, I don't know where the student went to college, but I have seen it then at Harvard, and it really deals a lot with the, and high school students can also do this because it just is done at a different level. One deals with sort of the social media, a more quantitative analysis of a social media, any kind of a particular issue. This kid was looking at Facebook, and he picked an issue and then was able over time, using over a year and a half, to gather an enormous amount of data from Facebook, different Facebook feeds through algorithms that he developed because he was more of a quantitative type, and then pull together a project at the end of that period of time that was basically an analysis of a particular issue area and how social media for that particular cohort had impacted it. And then in the last 5 years, I've had students at the college level produce papers that are focused on different issues around the impact of social media on people of their age group, and using different methods of research. They're not big research papers. This is something that, a high school student could theoretically do if it was a little bit different class, but the topic is really important, and it's important to them because it deals with the stress levels of this cohort, and it deals with what the sources are, how they go about dealing with it, what their original ideas are, because remember, research is about original thinking. What are the original ways that this student comes up with to deal with whatever the subset of issues are that they're dealing with? And a lot of it these days that I've seen over the course of, I'd say, the last 3 years has to do with coping measures and social anxiety and all these different types of, issues that people that are young adults are facing. So these are things that high school students can do. They do it at a different level. They don't do it in the same way that somebody who's a junior in college writes a 15-page paper, but they can all address the issue. And what they all learned is how to look up what's going on, who's looked at this before, what have they said, that kind of thing.
That was helpful. I guess my last question would be, and I know you probably as a teacher know this better than anybody, right? Developing that question is probably the hardest part in the beginning because there's unlimited opportunity, right? The world is filled with questions. And so would you say that this course specifically, that the group course that you presented on, which sounded great, is if a student were to walk in there hoping to develop a question, is that really what that's about? Like learning how to develop, or is it about the method of research?
No, it's going to be more about learning how to ask the questions. Okay. What are the questions that are interesting? Yeah, I don't know that they're going to come out with a single question.
Okay.
They may, but learning how to ask the questions, learning how to understand what is it going to take to figure out that this is a question that hasn't been researched before, or that it's an interesting question. Is it an important question? There's lots of questions, like you said, right? But what's important? Researchers, there's only a few people in the world that do this relative to the rest of the population, and research is hard. So what's important for us to look at?
Let me just say one last thing. So I'll give you an example of the quote unquote important questions that I try to develop with students. And an example would be more so in public health, right? I don't, social psychology, this type of stuff. is a little more complex from my perspective as it relates to kind of building application stories. So when you think about policy and you think about systems, it's easier to identify issues, right? And to think through how research could impact those issues. So the example I always give would be, for example, if a student is interested in understanding how a low-income housing project may positively or negatively impact the economic vitality of a community, right? They could engage in some level of research on a very simple question, right? Like about, let's take a look at a similar example, literature review, right? Of similar counties or similar inputs, right? In other systems, and then come back and say, based upon a literature review of similar economic progress in these counties, this is what I think I should do in my community. From a public health policy perspective, do you do anything like that? Or is that not really in that space?
Well, it's not really, yeah, we just don't look at the question from a public health policy perspective, but people can, and I've had students look at questions that deal with pregnancy outcomes for women in different countries at different points in time, and how that might be impacted by not just the healthcare system, which is a public health perspective, but how it may be looked at relative to what the women themselves are facing in the community, and so it's it's looking like I have a lot of help, a lot of students who are, interested in public health. All right. So it's like, this is not a public health class, but the issues are issues that you just look at from a different perspective. If I taught them, or helped them learn how to do that, then whether they end up going to a school of public health for a degree, or they end up with a degree in psychology, they're going to be pretty well, able to learn how to look at ask a question.
Agreed. Thank you so much. Much appreciated.
Thank you, John.
No problem.
Asking great question. Thank you. I just also wanted to mention in April, we will be having an economic and also finance PBL program is going to be ready to rolling out. So that's going to be coming up soon. So gradually we'll be having a lot of multiple industry projects, research learning based program to pushing on the market to be available for students to select. Okay, I just wanted to mention that. So that session, please watching our promotion materials. Okay, would you please answer that question of Frank Wang asking, what is the career path for students to major in psychology?
A career path?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, there are so many career paths for psychology. Some people end up going for clinical degrees because they want to do private counseling and clinical work with people. They want patients. Some people end up going into industrial psychology because they want to work in companies and do, counseling with people who are in, the corporate environment. There are people who go into school psychology. There are people who go into research. And there are people who go to med school. So, there are people who go to law school, but, a lot of it is, probably med school. So it's basically a very open field. I mean, there are people usually in psychology, the people who are going to graduate school may work for a couple of years before they decide what to do. Not unlike people these days, a lot of students who I've anecdotally known who take a gap year before going to med school. So it's a big field.
Okay. All right. Let me see if there's any other good questions. The project we're right now we're planning to start April 16th for the spring session. So the spring session is once a week. We started on April 16th. Okay, but the summertime we could be having another possibility to hosting session. Okay. Let me see. I think that's pretty it. Okay. for Rachel Lee asking, for the research part of the paper, should that be quantitative research or can also be qualitative?
I'm sorry, Sophia, I didn't hear what you said. What?
Okay, for the research part of the paper, should that can be quantitative research or can be qualitative?
No, yeah, it can be qualitative. It can be qualitative. It depends on what the question is. You know, and it may be a research paper that is focused on on identifying a particular area that will later need to be more, narrowed down. Because again, this is an introductory sort of foundational course. But it does not need to be, usually there's quantitative information that you're going to end up doing in research in social sciences, but it is not something that needs to be massively quantitative, no.
Right, okay. There's a person asking, will there be opportunity to do research with Dr. Debora? Yes, what I just said, there's a one-on-one opportunity will be offering. Okay. There is a question from our China side, Tenshin side. When we talk about stress, whether depression is possibly a consequences of anxiety disorder.
What about
when we talk about stress, is that depression? Whether depression is possibly a consequences of anxiety disorder?
Well, it could be an anxiety disorder. It could be just being, it's just the way most of us feel stressed at least some of the time. I wouldn't say that everybody has an anxiety disorder, right? Because labels are a very dangerous thing. But people can be stressed because of the whole point about stress is that it is based on the way we are looking at something. It is our attribution of an event. There is nothing intrinsic in some event that makes it stressful. It is our attribution that makes it stressful. And the result of that attribution that makes us stressful then has health impacts. Our blood pressure goes up, our immune system is severely compromised. All of those things that are related to immunology are a function of stress because of the various physiological levels that start to go crazy. So you may not have an anxiety disorder, but you can still be stressed and it will still impact your health.
Okay, let me do last question. How does each class require a lot of reading? How much time is expected outside of the class?
I would say that outside of class that it'll probably take them 1 to 2 hours to do the reading and the thinking in order to be prepared for the next class. I will provide them with the papers. Like they're not going to have to do searches in the literature until they figure out their own topics. But in terms of the content, decision making and data, things like that, I will provide them with stuff to look at and to think about over the course of the week. It should not take them more than 2 hours.
Okay. I think we have our student Kevin Jean also made a comment. Very good question. Hi, Dr. Phillips. Thank you for sharing your insight with us. I know that you were previously deeply involved in the funds and finance. So what's your turning point to study mindfulness? That's a great question. This is
what's my what?
Student. This is from a high school student, our student actually. Hi, Dr. Phillips. Thank you for sharing your insights with us. I know that you were previously deeply involved in funds and finance. What was your turning point to study mindfulness?
Here's my turning point was it became clear to me at a point in my work as a COO with senior management teams, and that we were all stressed all of the time. We could not get away from it, and everybody was always worried about change. That was the one thing I wasn't worried about. I welcome change. It was like, if we're going to change something, that's great. That's fine with me. It was like the only thing I didn't worry about was change. But I couldn't figure out what the problem was. And it didn't matter if I was working in a bank on Wall Street or in in a consulting environment, or if I was working in a big foundation. It's an $8 billion foundation. People in management and people up and down in any job, but people always were stressed. Now, people could say, well, that's New York, because I was New York based for a lot of that time. But I really needed to figure out there had to be something that could be done. And this was very fortuitous. I came upon something that Ellen Langer had written, and it was very fortuitous, but it basically was like, you have to stop being afraid of change, because change is constant and nothing is certain. I said, this is the answer. And so I was sort of introduced to her work, her research, and it was the answer for how business and then later education should be handled by everybody. We should change the way we do business, because people in business are constantly stressed and they're constantly getting sick and they don't understand what's going on. And so it was a big life lesson for me. That's my personal story of how I got out of Wall Street and into Harvard.
That is great. That is a great story. Very inspiring. I think it's kind of late right now. It is let me see. It's 10:30. I know you, Dr. Phillips has a lot of work to do tomorrow morning early. She gets up really early in the morning. So, any other questions? Welcome to, like I said, add my or Allison's and Tao's WeChat. At any IvyCompass staff WeChat, we'll be happy to answer to you. And also, John asked another question: is a 5-page essay is long enough to publish? We are asking minimum 5-page, but if the student has a very interest and want to write more, obviously have a better chance to publish. So we're asking minimum 5 pages, but if they can do more, then obviously much better. The chance gets higher. Again, thank you very much, Deborah. Thank you for your time.
You're very welcome. It's been great.
Yeah, thank you for your wonderful presentation, and you share a lot of knowledge. Every time I listen to it, I learn myself personally a lot. We'll be honored to be your student. Those students are very, very lucky. And so we're happy to maybe perhaps to have a more question passed on to you if we do have some questions we cannot answer. And thanks again. And thank you, John. Thank you, Kevin Jean. Thank you for asking a good question. And thank all the participants and family and moms. You guys are great. Thank you for supporting us all the way. And I wish you everybody have a great night, and looking forward to see you again on our other sessions. And thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Good night. Bye-bye.
好的，我这个 slide 在这边再停一下哈，大家没有扫码的，可以再扫一下。然后，如果有什么问题的话呢，当然还可以继续问哈。然后可能过几分钟我就把它给关掉了。
OK， 感兴趣的可以填这个表格哈，填这个表格了，我们就可以再跟您做一个细节的沟通。价格是这样的哈，价格是3000美元，所以非常 reasonable 哈。这个很难得请到这个哈佛的教授哈，所以我现在稍微这个跟大家分享一下。当然您到时候跟我们在沟通的时候，我们也会把这个价格体系告诉您。最后老师分享的经历，对，我可以跟您大概分享一下，就是其实这位老师他是 MIT， 你可以看到他是做城市规划的，然后呢他出来了以后，在一个大公司做过高管Senior Vice President， 就是副总裁、高级副总裁。刚刚那位高中同学 Kevin 金提的问题特别好，说明他做了很多功课啊。这个 Kevin 不知道走了没有，要给你很多的掌声啊，说明你做了很多 homework。那这位老师其实是在 finance industry 做了很长时间，然后做商业做了很长时间，但是他自己 under a lot of stress， 就是有很多的压力。后来他就机缘巧合认识了Dr. Langer。刚刚我也分享了这几本书的名字给您哈，他其实他写了很多的书。 其中有几本是在那个中国是有翻译的啊，都是中文的。当时我有一次偶然机会帮他做翻译，做了1天的他的课程翻译，那么我是看了他6、7本书才敢去帮他做翻译的啊，因为我担心有一些专业名词翻译的不太准确。Dr. Alan 非常 friendly 啊，所以我觉得如果有机会跟 Dr. Phillips 做项目的话，其实这个资源背后是很开放的，也就是说 there's more opportunity to engage Dr. Alan Langer 的这个 lab research lab， 这是有可能的哈，所以就是顺带的在私底下Dr. Phillips 那个不在了，我大力私底下跟大家透个底儿哈，就是他其实背后的背景是非常非常雄厚的啊。Dr. Alan Langer 我提醒一下，他是积极心理学的鼻祖，也是第1位哈佛大学第1位给女性的那个终身教授的啊，现在70多岁了，老人家看上去跟50岁人一样的啊，比我看上去还年轻啊，70岁了。这就是 mindfulness， 它最重要的一个发明是在50年代的时候，它是第一个把一个小镇全部改装成30年代的样子，然后把80多岁的老人颤颤巍巍的老人送到那个环境当中，让他们听当时他们年轻时候的音乐，看年轻时候的杂志。从而等这个20多天过后，这些老人们在送回家的时候，原来不能够提行李的都能够提行了。所以他说是一个 mindset。为什么他有本书叫 Counterclockwise 长寿我做主，讲的就是你的 mind 可以阻止你变老。这个就是他特别有名的一个试验，当时是一个特别转折点的一个轰动的一个试验。OK， 还有就是2个人没有离开再说点小故事哈。
我能说2句吗？问2句。
好的，当然，请
讲。所以这个 program 等于就是说，我们可以有机会，就是当然除了孩子可以学这些 fundamental psychology 这些那也可以帮他们发现一些就是跟 psychology related 一些 career path，right？
没错。
那还有就是说可以跟 Dr. Phillips 就说等于有他像有他背书一样，因为你参加他的 course 嘛。
Exactly。您听到没有？刚刚那个 John， 他就是我们 former admission officer 的管料，他也辅导了很多学生去不同的这个 top 20 school，right？ 那第一个就是您做的这个 research， 你可能还有第2、第3个 deep research， 因为还有很多学生9年级参加了以后，他10年级又衍生出来另外的 research。Dr. Phillips 现在自己本身就在做3个 research， 都是跟哈佛学校大学有关的，所以等这个关系建立好了以后，您第一有这样一位教授给你写推荐信，然后还有可能连接到其他的 resource。我为什么讲他的背后是有一个？刚刚我说的 Alan Langer 我是在这个跟他做翻译的时候认识 Dr. Phillips 的，所以他背后不只是他还有另外一个很牛的人。当时我们去上课，我就告诉你他的费用是8万美元1天。Alan Langer 老师的课程是1天8万美元。
一天8万美元。
1天8万美元。
所以那因为他这个 course 其实都很多是 research， 然后 project based， 就说你参加他这个 course 的话，那可能等于也就是他会有一些 research 的 topic， 你就是学生也可以跟着 involve， 是这个意思吗？就是一起。
下一步，第一步，这个时候这次的这个有点像 fundamental 的，对 foundation fundamental。他会教你怎么 ask the question， 因为 research asking question very important， 很重要，对吗？所以他会教你，因为最难的他刚刚说的不是 answering question， 最难的实际上是 asking good question， 所以他会教你怎么样去发现好的 question，然后呢，他会教你 research 的 fundamental 的 methods， 这样的话，咱们家孩子以后到了大学以后，大量的 paper 要写，大量的 research， 大量的 discussion。所以在高中的时候有这样的一个机会，你也刚刚听到这样讲的，实际上我们 PBL 讲的意思就是不是老师给你上课，而是老师作为一个 facilitator， 让小孩子学着自己思考。对，这就是 PBL。大学的招生官想看到的是孩子自己做事情，而不是被我们中国人传统的教。我们一直在说怎么教，怎么学，而是美国大学更希望看到你孩子自己怎么去 take on 一个 subject， 自己去发现，自己去做。所以 P 调的不同是它不是上课，就是我们一定要记住，它是一个 research project， 是老师带着他做。这个不知道解释清楚了没有
？OK。
OK， 那个 Sophia， 我也想补充一下哈，其实这个课程的话呢，它比较更像一个 introduction to psychology， 就是说，他先要教孩子知道什么是 psychology， 这个 psychology 里面到底是学些什么东西。因为我们很多时候遇到的情况是，孩子他想学 psychology， 或者他对这个某一个学科感兴趣，但可能他没有真正的是钻研过这个学科到底在做些什么东西。所以那这一个项目的话呢，第一个是让孩子有一个切入点，能了解这个学科，如果他以后想要选这个专业的话，到底是在干嘛？第二个就是说的话呢，因为招生官的话呢，他看这个招生，他看这个你的整个profile 的话呢，他是看的是一层一层的 evidence， 所以他可能不是说你只做一个背景提升项目，然后可能从毫无背景一下子跟了一个这个藤校的教授，然后就在这一块上面有所建树了。它其实是一层叠一层的，比方说像 AP 的 psychology， 它也是在为你的这一个整个 profile 作为一个 evidence 来做一个铺垫。所以的话就是说，这个的话呢 depends on 您的孩子他目前是做到哪一步了。所以我们有些时候说，你除了做背景提升之外，可能还要修课，对吧？甚至有些还会下校。还有做实习，还有做这个 volunteer， 那这些都是所谓的是一层一层的 evidence， 所以可能这一个项目的话呢，因为基于它的这一个 structure 和它的这个付费收费，它其实可能不是说像我们家长想的，你光一下子这个几个课上完之后，你就有一篇非常好的这个 paper， 然后拿去发表这种 peer review journal 哈，这个我们是比较就是说实话实说，它其实是给你打一个基础，那你之后的话呢，你至少是你可以写一个 proposal 哈，就是说关于你以后想要钻研的这个课题，那你和这个 Dr. Philip 搭上线之后的话呢，他是有这个可能会做这个1对1的。这样的一个tutoring 的，那到那个时候的话呢，您可能孩子需要自己有自己的一个 topic 出来，然后他再给你一些辅导，然后你再最后写成一篇我们所说的就是说最终的这个质量非常好的一篇文章。对，好的，我大概就补充到这里。对，
特别好，补充的特别好。
大家如果有问题的话，我看现在是不是我们都回答完了？茱莉亚，然后我们可以就是说，大家可以在群里面继续 follow up 哈，和我们。然后我这边收到的一些家长的话，我也会把那个比较详细的这一个宣传册发给您看一下。然后这个项目的话呢，说老实话，我们现在只开1个班，目前因为他的时间太难调了，这个 Dr. Philip。所以我们也想，就说能开多几个班，就是满足不同的这个时区哈。对，
太忙了，他非常非常的忙。
对，所以这个的话也请家长谅解哈，就是说如果您现在有这个机会的话哈，就是说可能不一定要等到夏天，因为夏天的话，他之前给我们讲过，他有很多的这个research program。对，
也就是其实就是1星期就一个半小时嘛，对吧？90分钟，其实就是给孩子一个机会，跟导师1个半小时，其他的时间很多都是自己在做事情，所以我觉得。还是可以。我们这次只邀请6到8个不超过8个学生。OK， 好，那我们今天就先到这儿吧哈。大家有问题的话，特别欢迎您加我们再继续跟您回答问题啊。行，那个 Angeline 有什么那个要跟我们分享的吗？
你刚才也有10几个人，然后现在只剩下，好的，没问题，这个谢谢啊，那个好的，那我们可以停止，我这边也停。
好的，好，感谢大家。大家晚安，感谢支持，特别感谢，好，下次见，拜拜。